Can Dominic Breazeale shock the world? I'm Teekosey, and this is with just 15 defeats. Hi guys, I'm Teekosey and I'm your host for another round of With Just 15 Defeats. In today's show, we're going to be discussing Anthony Joshua versus Dominic Breazeale for the IBF World Heavyweight Title. So thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you stumbling across this video. If you enjoy the content, please give me a thumbs up. And I really hope that you get a little bit of an insight to how the fight is going to go, and a little bit of an insight into Anthony Joshua's opponent for those of you who haven't really heard of the guy. So first of all, as I say, if you like the content, give us a thumbs up. Please leave us some comments below. So just scroll down to the bottom, leave us some comments. I'll get back to you shortly. And lastly, in the top right hand corner, there's going to be a brief poll. This is going to pop up in a few moments. Just going to be a simple question, and you just click yes or no. Very easy to participate in that. So let's get on with the show. Dominic Breazeale challenging Anthony Joshua for the title that Anthony Joshua won against Charles Martin just a few months ago. Now, as we can remember, the fight was definitive in its result. Anthony Joshua knocked out Charles Martin convincingly in 2 rounds. But the performance of Charles Martin was very, very disappointing for fight fans all over the world, not just heavyweight fans, but fight fans all across the world, whether you're a heavyweight fan, a general boxing fan, or even if you're a casual fan. And for the guys that just support Anthony Joshua, I'm sure just people that have started to follow the sport because of Anthony Joshua, the looks and what he brings to it, the whole Olympic situation, I'm sure everyone can appreciate that how one-sided and disappointing Charles Martin's performance was. Hardly threw a punch and didn't really make an effort to kind of survive, and really he gave up the title. He really gave up the title, and that was a major disappointment for everyone involved, to be honest. And I'm sure even Anthony Joshua would admit that it was a bit of a hollow victory. He won the belt. You saw the way that he celebrated in the ring afterwards. It was all a bit. He was slightly embarrassed. Eddie Hearn and co. They were going crazy, and there was confetti and all that business. But you could see Anthony Joshua was like, "I've won the strap, but how much? What does this mean?" Realistically, to him, all it really meant was probably more pound notes in his back pocket. So let's move on to the fight, to Dominic Breazeale. Who is Dominic Breazeale? Now, Dominic Breazeale, he's a former football player, former American football player. He comes from that background. Doesn't really have a boxing background. And in fact, only really got into the sport about 5 or 6 years ago. So that's not a long time to kind of perfect your craft in anything, really. And you're now challenging one of the top guys in the sport. It's been quite a fast journey for him. But here's a few interesting points. Now, Dominic Breazeale, as I say, he only got into the sport 5 to 6 years ago, but he was selected as an Olympian for America in 2012. Now, what do we know about the Olympics in 2012? We know that Anthony Joshua won gold, right? Dominic Breazeale went to London 2012 but lost his first match. He lost his very first match, so didn't proceed any further and didn't achieve at the games. Didn't medal or anything, but he was chosen as an Olympian. Obviously, Anthony Joshua went on to the final and he won it. There was controversial kind of scoring in that final, and if you've watched the head-to-head, the gloves are off between Anthony Joshua and Dominic Breazeale. Breazeale makes the comment that he does not believe that Anthony Joshua won that fight. Okay, so as I recall, it was a very, very close matchup in the end. Joshua ended up getting the gold medal. But anyway, another interesting point is that they've got similar records. They've got very similar records. Now, Anthony Joshua, he's 16-0, all KOs. Dominic Breazeale, 17-0, 15 KOs. So very similar. And the fact that they both competed at the same Olympic Games shows that they're kind of, from a professional standpoint, they're at a similar sort of level. And they've actually fought similar level sort of guys, despite the fact that Anthony Joshua now holds one of the straps. Okay, and then another similar comparison that we can make between these two guys is their actual size. We know in heavyweight boxing, because of how it is, we often get mismatches in terms of sizes. We get some guys that are huge in terms of height, reach, and weight and shape. So we often get quite a difference in size. But in this matchup, it's going to be very similar in terms of the height and the reach. Dominic Breazeale is going to be marginally taller, and he's going to be packing a few more pounds. But that's just more about the shape. We know that Anthony Joshua is a specimen. He is a specimen. He's a bit of a one-off. There isn't really anyone else like him that is as defined in terms of his physique. So he's a bit of a one-off. Dominic Breazeale is probably going to come in 10-12 pounds heavier, I would have thought, come the weigh-in. Now, there are five things I can tell you about Breazeale, about what sort of fighter he is, and the style that he's gonna offer, and what he's offered to date. Now, he's a very upright boxer. So if you think about it, he's very tall, he's very big, but he fights very tall, very upright. But his movement is a very plodding style. He's not quick and agile. He does cover the ring, but he's a bit of a plodder, and he fights very upright. Right? The second thing is that he's actually a reasonable boxer. I'm not going to say he's a good boxer. I'm not going to say he's got exceptional skills or anything like that. I'm going to say he's reasonable, considering the amount of time he's had in the sport. He's a reasonable boxer, as I say. He's very upright. He's got a decent jab, and obviously he's got natural power. So the combination gives him a reasonable skill set, right? The next thing, and this is a negative. This is a negative on his part, and this is actually two. It's the third and the fourth things are kind of they're associated, but they're kind of polar opposites. And so the third point is that he allows his opponent in quite close a lot of the time. So he allows his opponent in close, and the opponent is allowed to kind of rough him up and getting close. And considering the size, that's quite an unusual trait to have. I know some of these big guys do it. They like to get in close themselves, but Breazeale doesn't use it to his own benefit. I think sometimes he can get a bit lazy, and he allows the opponent to come in and get close. Right? Now, the next point, which I alluded to just a few moments ago, is the fourth point, and this is that despite Breazeale's size and reach, he's often out of reach of the opponent when he's on the offense. So when he's on the offense, because of his poor footwork, he's often not close enough to his opponent to land any telling shots. And that's quite an interesting combination when you think about it, that on the defense, he allows his opponents in quite close, and his opponents can land shots. But when he's on the offense, he's not quite in range. And that's obviously something to do with the fact that he is somewhat inexperienced in the greater sense of things, right? And then the fifth point, which is something he shares with Anthony Joshua, is terrible head movement. Very upright, as we said in the first point, but his head doesn't really move. It's a sitting target, and he will eat shots. He will eat shots. Doesn't matter what caliber of opponent he's been up against, he's eaten a lot of shots. So they're the 5 points that will give you a bit of an understanding into the sort of boxer Dominic Breazeale is. Okay, now Dominic Breazeale, like Anthony Joshua, and a lot of these guys, they haven't really fought opponents of that much interest throughout their career, because obviously they're young guys, and these guys have been pushed to prominence this year when possibly they're not ready. They don't have a CV that says that they've beaten decent guys, and now they are worthy of fighting for titles and in big fights that the world is looking forward to. So we have to just look at the CV that Dominic Breazeale has, and he only really has two opponents that are credible. Okay, and firstly, that is a guy called Teekosey. He fought him just under a year ago. Now, Teekosey is a small guy, Cameroonian. He's got a record himself of 18-5 at the time of recording. Now, Teekosey has been in the ring with a couple of decent guys, Amir Mansour, Chris Arreola, Dominic Breazeale, and Hughie Fury. He's lost 3 of them. He's drawn with Chris Arreola, and he's a decent opponent. He's a decent opponent. He's a small guy. He's only 6 foot. He's got a smaller reach. He's fairly. He's averagely rounded in terms of the skill set, but he's been unfortunate in a couple of those defeats. The Amir Mansour fight, if I remember correctly, Amir Mansour basically switched his lights off in devastating fashions. I'm pretty sure this is the one where it's one of the most brutal knockouts you're likely to see. And the Chris Arreola was a draw, and I think a lot of people said that really Teekosey should have won that fight. So then we move, and he obviously fought Hughie Fury recently. Hughie Fury, there was an accidental head clash. Hughie Fury won it on a technical decision. But anyway, in terms of the Dominic Breazeale fight, it went the full 10 rounds. So if you think about that, it went the full 10 rounds, and despite the fact that there was a significant size, weight, everything difference really between the two guys, and the judges scored the fight in Dominic Breazeale's favour quite heavily. But I think most people that have actually watched the fight do not agree with the judges. They think it's a lot closer, and at the best, it was a draw. It was a draw. Teekosey was active. He landed good shots. Dominic Breazeale wasn't convincing at all. And I know a lot of people said that Teekosey won that fight. Teekosey won that fight. So that's an interesting point. So a smaller man kind of outworked him, and he wasn't able to put He wasn't able to put Fred Cassie away, despite the fact that Fred Cassie had been knocked out horrifically in the last year. Now, the other opponent that Dominic Breazeale has fought, in fact, it was his last opponent this year, January, he fought Amir Mansour. Amir Mansour, again, is a smaller guy, a lighter guy, but reasonably skilled and got decent power. As I said, I just mentioned that he knocked out Fred Cassie previously. But Amir Mansour has got decent power. He's an older guy, but he's got relatively good movement, both respects, and good power. And you watch this fight, it only went 5 rounds. It only went 5 rounds because Mansour did not come out for the 6th round. But for 4 of those rounds, Amir Mansour, it was dominating this fight. He was completely outworking Breazeale. He had good shots. He damaged him. And obviously what happened in the beginning of the 5th round, I believe, Don Breazeale landed a mammoth punch. He landed a big punch, and it basically split Mansour's tongue. I believe that's what happened. And then Mansour went for the kill. He knew that was it. He knew he wasn't gonna be able to come out for another round. The corner weren't going to let him. So he went all out to try and stop Breazeale. And to be honest, he almost did. But he didn't quite manage it. And then he obviously had to be stopped. So this isn't a convincing record that we're building for Dominic Breazeale. But anyway, why has this fight come about? It's because he's undefeated, and it's a good promotional. There's a lot of ability to promote this well because both undefeated, both Olympians, both huge, both got lots of KOs, all that sort of stuff that promoters like. But the one thing I noticed at the time of this being announced was that in the rankings at the time, Breazeale was ranked below David Haye. And at the time, David Haye had only fought Mark Demori in 4 years. So that kind of shows you where Dominic Breazeale was at the time of this being announced. Right, so how do I think that this fight is going to go? Simply put, I think it's going to finish in a stoppage. As we discussed, Dominic Breazeale is going to allow Anthony Joshua in close. He's not going to fight clever. He's going to allow him close, and because he's got poor head movement, he's going to eat shots. And we know that Anthony Joshua has possibly the most power in the heavyweight division currently. So that doesn't bode well for him. But what we can say is that Dominic Breazeale has gone rounds before. He's got a lot of rounds under his belt, and he's gone full rounds. And as I said, because he has poor head movement, he lets people in close. He does eat a lot of shots, and he still managed to either knock his opponents out or go the full distance. So there's that in his favour. Now, the only way that Anthony Joshua can lose, period, I think, is if you get under Anthony Joshua's skin. You got to get under Anthony Joshua's skin, and we saw this in the Dillian Whyte fight, where at the end of the first round there was punching after the bell. Everyone jumped in the ring, and it was all a bit crazy. But then it all kind of the next round. I think there was a bit of like an adrenaline charge in between rounds, and Dillian Whyte managed to land some good punches. And another day, Dillian Whyte stops Anthony Joshua in that round. He stops in the round. There's no two ways about it. He just couldn't really. I think he'd taken so much damage himself previously that he didn't quite have enough to kind of seal the deal. And that's because Anthony Joshua normally is quite considered. He's quite calculated. He doesn't rush things. He's quite methodical. He's quite slow paced, and he knows his strengths. He fights to his strengths, and he doesn't really rush in until he sees the opponent crumble in front of him, and then he really goes in for the kill. But he's not wasteful. He's very considered, and I think that's why you need to get under his skin to make him think, make him rush, make him make mistakes. So does Dominic Breazeale have a chance? Well, I've kind of I've given other people the benefit of the doubt in the last couple of months, and I will say that Dominic Breazeale does have a chance, because everyone in the heavyweight division does have a chance, and the facts are the facts. Dominic Breazeale is as big as Anthony Joshua. He can knock people out. He's got a good reach. He's got good power. He's been seen to take a punch himself, but it all depends on what happens on the 25th of June at the O2, when they look into each other's eyes, when that first bell rings, and one of them is, well, we'll know whether Dominic Breazeale's got something, because it will be when that first punch hits, and it's often that first punch is what changes a fight. Now, this is what I've said in the David Haye Arnold Breazeale fight. I actually think Arnold Breazeale went into that fight believing that he had a chance. And if you watch that fight, within about 15 seconds, David Haye lands an absolute bomb. It's a huge, huge punch. And I think from that one punch, the fight completely changes. Now, he ate that punch and he went on, continued, and it wasn't until like a minute or so down the line that he started to really crumble. But I think it was that first punch he ate, it made him reevaluate where he was in that fight, and he decided that he didn't have a chance. And that could be the same situation we have here. Dominic Breazeale, once he eats that first punch, he's either going to go, do you know what, I can take this, and I've got a chance, or he's going to go, shit, this is going to be tough, and it kind of reevaluates the mindset. So we'll see on those first punches, because we've seen upsets in the past. What happens if Dominic Breazeale is the first to the punch, and he has the power to crumble Anthony Joshua? Because we've seen in that Dillian Whyte fight that despite the fact Anthony Joshua went and won that fight, he took those punches and he was hurt. He was hurt in that fight. So Anthony Joshua can be hurt. Can Dominic Breazeale land a first punch? We'll have to wait and see. It's going to be really interesting. But just quickly look at the odds, just for the laugh. Anthony Joshua is 1-40 and Dominic Breazeale is 12-1. So that is a 52-point swing, which just shows you that they don't think that Breazeale has much of a chance. The odds are in favour of an early 3-round stoppage. Dominic Breazeale to win in the first round's 50-1, so quite high. We've got method of victory. Joshua by KO is 1-14, but Dominic Breazeale was 14-1. Now, one thing that I saw was to be knocked down and win, to be knocked down and still win. Joshua 16-1, Dominic Breazeale 33-1. So there might be a little bit of value there, if that was to interest anyone there. But as I say, I think Anthony Joshua is going to win this fight relatively easily. So that's pretty much my video on this fight. In the next coming weeks, I'm going to be producing a series of videos where I'm going to be, for the first time ever, giving my ranking on the current heavyweight situation, and I'm going to be telling you who I think are the top 25 heavyweight boxers in the world today. And this is going to be based on ability, not on who's beaten who or the CVs. This is going to be based on pure ability. So I'm going a little bit, I'm taking a side step slightly different to what other people do in terms of ranking. But I think this is going to be a really interesting series of videos, and we're going to probably set those videos up probably after we've got, in the coming weeks, we've obviously got the Joshua fight, we've got the Klitschko Fury fight, we've got Deontay Wilder, and obviously we've got Joseph Parker. So I'm probably going to release these after those fights have been completed, so probably in about 5 to 6 weeks. So thanks for joining me in this video. I really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up, and I want to hear from you with any comments. Thanks very much. I've been Teekosey.